Hi everyone, welcome to this session of Author Live. Today I'm in conversation with Sheba Ghosh and we're going to talk about her book Butterfly in a Bind. So first of all, welcome Sheba to this chat, and would you like to introduce yourself and your book to the audience, please?
Hi, I am Sheba Ghosh. I'm a 33-year-old mom. I served the Indian Air Force for about 10 years as an officer, and I retired in 2021 of December
Mhm.
to pursue my passion of filmmaking and storytelling. So I've made my first film, and I'm waiting to sell it to any OTT or
Mhm.
any buyer or a co-producer. And in the meantime, I've come out with this book that was released this last month,
Yes.
Butterfly in a Bind.
Mhm.
So, Butterfly in a Bind is a very personal story told through the medium of characters.
Mhm.
We all face something or the other because of who we are, where we were born, the body we are in,
Mhm.
and we have our own set of challenges. And at the same time, we have a lot of privilege.
Mhm.
So imagine you were somebody who was an alien in your own body,
Mhm.
not accepted, or you were trolled, or you were disregarded, or you were just disrespected at every stage of your life. You felt unsafe.
Mhm.
Be yourself. This is that story. The idea was not to create just a crime thriller. The way you can inform society about somebody or about something is to weave a tale around it. And
Mhm.
that was the idea with Butterfly in a Bind. So this book not only talks about Vijaya, who is a trans woman, it
Mhm.
also talks about domestic violence. It
Yes.
talks about it talks about um, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. There are a lot of social issues talked about in this book, but it's talked about in a manner that
Mhm.
is engaging. I mean, it's not sermonizing.
Mhm. Right. Right. Like first of all, I mean, I was going to touch upon these things, just the fact that, how you're able to so flawlessly weave, fiction with these social and political issues. And, your career has been so illustrious. Like you're an Indian Air Force veteran and you've also made a film. So like, is this a genre like thriller in general? Or just the fact that you highlight so many social and political issues? Is this something that's new to you, or this is something that you've been doing for a while?
This is something all of us do, but I've been doing this especially since I became a mom. So
Hmm.
it's much more easier to tell your child something through the medium of a story than
Right.
by just saying you're supposed to do this and you're supposed to do that, or listen to me because I'm saying so. Is
Hmm.
that the film that I made,
Yeah.
though it is a psychological thriller,
Mm-hmm.
the root of it is about mental health. It's
Mm-hmm.
about race because all the most of the characters in that film are from the Northeast. My son is Gorkha, my husband is Gorkha. So
Mm.
I want our people not to be showcased as a separate person. Like Vijaya in Butterfly in a Bind is not a side piece or
Mm-hmm.
a or like a character that you bring in for comic relief or
Yeah.
just to show Buddha. It is this is her life.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. Storytelling, I've been telling, making up stories since childhood, like most
Ah,
of us.
yeah, I did assume, because I mean, I am all praises for your book. I think you already know that, but I would like to mention this again that, your writing is so colorful in a way. You're able to put in so many like complex characters in such a morally gray, realistic sort of way. And like I said, you're also able to highlight minorities in like, in the protagonist light, right? So like what's the inspiration behind the story, like the story writing process, like how did you begin writing this story?
Vijaya came to me through my own issues.
Okay.
Like I would tunnel inside and start thinking about things that I'm going through. But it started making me wonder, what if I was somebody without the benefits and privileges that I have being who I am?
Mm.
How would I face life then? It's then when Bijoya came, and me being a Bengali, I started
Mm-hmm.
thinking about my roots. And
Mm-hmm.
for me, the biggest memory I have from my childhood, I haven't lived in Kolkata much. It's only
Mm-hmm.
now that I've shifted and settled here. But my childhood is mostly very strongly connected with Ma Durga. So I wanted to, then again, the storyteller in me wanted to make it a little eye catching, so that I shake you enough to wake up and see who is it. Like if I were to put Vijaya anywhere else, she would have been forgotten. But
Right.
because she was inside the idol of Ma Durga, you had to listen to her story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think
And
yeah, please continue. Please continue.
the writing process is a very gradual process. It took me 6 years to write this book, because the first 2 years when I had my first draft, I completely shelved that story. And
Ah.
then I started again. I just took fragments from the previous story,
Mm-hmm.
like the body inside Ma Durga, but everything else had to be changed. And by the time I came to you,
Yeah.
just a few days before I came to you, I changed the ending as well. It
Ah.
sometimes you want to sensationalize everything because that's in your blood, na? Like
Mm-hmm.
masala chahiye. But at
Right.
the same time, you have to be very sensitive.
Right. Yes.
So the writing process, obviously, I'm a little crazy that all the characters are in my head and they're always talking to each other at the time if the story is not resolved. So I let the story unfold in my head. It's not.
Mhm.
It's like the information is there in the universe. You're just channeling it.
Right.
So,
Uh, I did assume that you were being really careful with your writing. And, it makes sense now that you've mentioned that it took you 6 years to write a book. Because I feel like for a genre like thriller or mystery, or like, in a whodunit style, you need to be extremely careful about your loopholes or just, in the way you are able to give information to the readers at specific periods of time, so that it kind of makes sense in the end, when everything comes together. So is this genre something you've been reading a lot or something that you've written a lot in? Where did that interest come from?
so I grew up with Agatha Christie. I would
Ah.
I would steal a few books of hers from the school library because we were allowed only 2 books a week. So I would get some under my sweater and then take her with me. And then, she lived in my head for many years.
um
And after that, I graduated, but she was always my first love the author. So I wanted that. And in terms of film, I really liked Hitchcock's way of presenting facts. It's
right.
not always obvious.
Mm-hmm.
It sometimes it just catches you off guard for a moment. So that
Mm-hmm.
is what I wanted to incorporate in my style of storytelling. At,
Right.
at the same time, giving it my own touch, I cannot help but let people be people.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to make them human. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're human, you are your worst enemy at times. You are the best that you can be. You're trying to be your best, but you may not always be that. So when somebody catches you on your not such a good time, when you're not at your very best, you turn out to be a devil to them. And
Yeah.
at the same time, if they catch you at your very best moment, they find you to be the most charismatic person. So that's
Mm-hmm.
how I built Vijaya, through
Right.
the recollections
Mm-hmm.
and reflections of other people. She's either crazy, or she's either arrogant, or she's loving,
Mm-hmm.
or she's demonic. She's everything because she's human.
Right. And I mean, of course, I wouldn't want to spoil the book, but I would like to mention that, the story revolves around murder of Vijaya, but you give this like, dual POV sort of a like input into the story, where we are also going through ACP Shyama's mind and we're also going through Vijaya's mind, right? And like you mentioned, you want your characters to be human. And I really like the fact that your characters, they come off as both frustrating sometimes, but also like, very, very relatable. So was this like a conscious decision, and how difficult is it to write characters so human?
It is difficult wherein you need to rein in yourself at times. Sometimes you give so much onto the book. Initially, I chopped it to one third of its size and then gave it to you,
Mm-hmm.
because there was too much of disruption, too much. I see it in my mind's eye when I'm writing it, and then I have to tell myself, the people who are going to read it are probably going to skip through these parts. So the toughest part is to keep just enough to make them human and
Right.
for you to still be interested in the story.
Mm-hmm.
And the best part, the best thing that can happen to you as creators, as writers or storytellers, is having horrible people in your life.
Mm.
Like the worst shitty thing that can sorry for my language, but the worst thing
That's
that can
okay.
happen to you, it is just fodder for your writing material.
Mhm.
And I've met so many really nice and really terrible people who just made their way into my stories.
Right, yeah. And I also feel like you have a filmmaker's mind, when you're kind of going through these characters, because just the fact that you're able to set the scene so well, and the dialogues that are in this book, it to me it felt like I'm watching a movie. I was able to translate it from the book to a movie. So was this again a conscious decision for you?
Uh, so I wrote the book before I wrote the script for my film Kazi and shot the film.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I did the final editing after I made the film and sent it out to film
Uh-huh.
festival. So
Okay.
I took my took the experience I had as a script writer
Mm-hmm.
and applied it to the book.
Uh,
So things about script writing is every scene should feel like an independent movie, and I try
right.
to do the same thing with my book. And a dialogue should flow.
Mm.
We say a lot of things that are colloquial, like
Mm.
yeah, abbe, ye, and all that. If it's not necessary, it need not be added. And
Mm-hmm.
real life dialogue is very boring if you consider two people who are talking about anything,
Yeah.
about sandwiches or something. So you have, it is now up to you to
Mm.
grab your reader's attention.
Right. So, the other thing that I think really is focused in your book, like you mentioned, is abuse and violence in different forms, right? And all your protagonists, most of your protagonists are women. So, you are able to show these women in all, like, it's not in the way that you're portraying all of them as victims. Everyone has their vices, everyone has their folly. So, like, when it comes to violence and abuse and kind of translating it into your book without like being sensitive about it, but also not like triggering anyone, so do you have any sort of advice about writing such scenes in the book? Because I feel like you have done it pretty well in your book.
Yes, as you will see in OTT these days,
Mm-hmm.
the violence is given free rein. There's
Mm.
so much of gore and it's so out there. It's unnecessary. You can hint and give your audience the benefit of their intelligence to figure out what has happened.
Right.
I did that for myself with the Didima's scene when she was a 9-year-old child, right
Mm-hmm.
after the marriage. Not to spoil it for anybody, I cut out more than 3/4 of that scene. I went into heavy detail about what actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
But she's also a child. I'm at that time. She
Mm-hmm.
may be a 80, 90-year-old woman now, but at that time she was a child. I'm using her trauma to
Mm-hmm.
generate news. I have to be mindful of that. What if it was
Right.
my child? What if it was my story? I
Mm-hmm.
don't want any stranger to know how I looked back then, or you just need to know that it happened, and I need your understanding and your
Mm-hmm.
empathy. I don't need your lechery.
Mm. Right. So, also, are you able to translate this into other genres? Because I know this is your debut fiction novel, but you've also written a book of poetry. You write short stories, right? So, what are your usual themes?
The genre may be a little different for me. Sometimes I write suspense, sometimes I write ghost stories,
Mm-hmm.
and my filmography is about psychological thriller and horror. But the
Mm-hmm.
core of it is human experience for me. For me,
Right.
it's a core mudda that I will hold close to me, and I'll weave the other muddas around. Sorry, the other. What's the word for mudda? I forgot. I get brain farts all the time. The
Other
I wish I was a
other
politician right now. Issues. Yes.
issues, yes.
The issues are the main thing, and
Mm.
how do you tell it in the most fascinating way? And
Right.
these suddenly come to me. It's when I'm my most busiest self, when I'm doing something, preparing for something. That's when the ideas come. And when the ideas come, I let them simmer. I
Mm-hmm.
let them sit. I let them like start stinking and enough so that the smell propagates to other parts of my thoughts. So
Right.
until it consumes me. So the genre reveals itself that way. I don't force myself into a writing. I let the thought evolve and
Uh-huh.
guide me.
Right. So you don't go into writing thinking that, this is a genre that I'm going to try. It just comes to you, basically.
Comes that.
Hmm.
Comes that.
I see. And also, like, when you're writing and whatever genre it may be, whatever you're writing about, there's this thing when you're writing about, especially political and social issues, where, especially if it's fiction, it can be used as propaganda, or, you have this kind of weapon to kind of, influence people's mind. So, in the current political and social scenario of our country, because you are able to throw light into that in your book, right? So how do you kind of maneuver through, those kind of ethical issues when you're writing?
You have to be mindful of the power of your pen.
Hmm.
I believe a lot of people, whether it's a film or whether it's a book, a lot of people enjoy the titillation of a negative issue or a negative character being utilized for the sake of money, for fame, or whatever. But we have to realize that real can sometimes translate into real life, or your books will follow. The thing is, if you want to see something happen,
Mm-hmm.
you have to write about it. If you
Right.
want to see change, you have to show that change already existing, so
Mm-hmm.
that it becomes very prevalent in the minds of people. That is propaganda. If In my film Kazi, I have a character playing a trans woman playing a doctor's role, because
Okay.
for me it didn't matter whether who what that person was. It was their qualification that mattered, and their ability to make my patient survive. The
Right.
character thing. But I want to see more people from communities that are marginalized. I want to see them in the forefront. So
Right.
the only way I can do that is to already show them that way.
Mm-hmm.
The same thing is, if you propagate something negative, like if I were to make a film on, for example, Adolf Hitler, I
Mm-hmm.
show him as the hero. You start romanticizing this person,
Right.
and everything that this person stood for gets normalized.
Yeah. Mm.
It gets embedded. The, there has to be a moral fiber to this. I know
Mm-hmm.
100 people, a million people will disagree with me on this,
Mm-hmm.
but I believe your the first person who actually taught me this was my editor.
Mm-hmm.
The first short story I had written, I'd used the word slut,
Mm-hmm.
SLU, slut. She said, "This is lazy writing. You
Mm-hmm.
can show your frustration, your character's frustration in any means possible. But
Mm-hmm.
why are you trying to propagate a section of society
Mm-hmm.
as a derogatory term? Are
Right.
you trying to say that they are less of a human being?"
Mm-hmm.
I said, like, no, but this is a common way people, this is how, it's like, they may be doing that, but you don't need to propagate that. So
Mm-hmm.
it got me thinking that actually I'm not using my mind much if I just spew the same thing somebody else is doing. If I want
Right.
change, I show the change.
Mm-hmm. Right. I feel like you're talking about how you are able to put these characters in already prevalent, situationships or circumstances, so that it becomes more normalized. It reminds me about how, in our country itself, there are all these movies coming up, more writers coming up, who are coming up with these stories, who are able to kind of throw light into this situation as well. So, like, when it comes to talking about these things, people call it being woke, but how do you think people can balance it out? Because like you mentioned, like your editor mentioned that, if you use these words, you're embedding it in the culture of our culture, basically. But also, if you're overdoing it, or if you're making a mockery of it, that also, gives it, it also throws a negative light, basically. So where do you find the balance in that?
I really don't know how to answer this because I'm trying to figure it out for myself at the moment.
I feel like you were
Because
able to do it well in your book, though.
I had a lot of guidance. I had it edited for sensitivity by a trans woman in
Mm,
America who is a sensitivity editor,
okay.
and she blew my mind open. The way I had written about Vijay initially, she said you're
Mm-hmm.
objectifying her the way a man would objectify a woman.
Mm-hmm. Right.
How would you feel if your dead body is found and the first thing they talk about are your breasts?
Mm-hmm.
That's how I had started the book. She
Okay.
said, you have the power to change the narrative.
Hmm.
You would be offended by that. Why wouldn't Vijaya be offended by it?
Hmm.
And her words really helped me think and create a far better version of what this was. I'm sure
Hmm.
there's a lot of scope for improvement, which
Hmm.
I will imbibe in future writings. But coming back to your question about balance and about wokeness and all that, I feel it's unnecessary to just hurt somebody's feelings just because you can. I
Hmm.
mean, I was taught by my parents that if you don't have a kind word to say,
Hmm.
just don't say anything. Calling people fat
Hmm.
or calling people whatever. There's so many words that attributed. I faced it so many times. I was just hurt when I was 3 months pregnant. Somebody said, "Oh, you look like you're about to pop with twins." That
Uh,
was such an unnecessary comment.
mhm.
But I was supposed to be cool about it. So there are certain
Right.
things that just don't make sense. You can, if you could be anything, why not be kind?
Right. Yeah.
You're not propagating unhealthy eating culture by not addressing somebody as fat. They
Mm-hmm.
know it. If I look at the mirror, I know how I look. I know I need to get up and exercise more. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't need you to remind me when I feel like I'm looking my best,
Mm-hmm.
or when I feel like I've just had the most amazing day. But at the same time, there's something that bothers me, and it's in my head, and I'm still addressing it because I don't know the meaning yet. Where is the distinction between judgment
Mm-hmm.
and being concerned?
Mm.
For example, we feel like our society is very close minded, they wouldn't understand us smoking or drinking. At the same time, if somebody is telling you not to smoke because they're concerned about your health,
Mm-hmm.
we still consider her वो तो बहुत judgmental है.
Mm.
So I do not yet know
Mm-hmm.
how to think about this yet. I'm still studying, still
Mm.
trying to figure out.
I mean, human nature is definitely a spectrum, and just the fact that you're studying it and kind of processing it with your own writing means a lot. And like you mentioned, I think one thing that I'm really glad about is that you had a sensitivity editor with you who went through your story. And, when it comes to political issues, especially for the rights of the LGBTQ community, do you think this is like, being more sensitive is something that we have been able to do as a country, or do you think we still have, far to go?
You can always improve. There's always room for improvement.
Mm-hmm.
We're always hurting somebody or the other with like casual comments
Mm.
by calling somebody gay or like using it as a slur at the same time. That's we can always improve. I always feel that we're quite far behind.
So, as writers, can you give other writers some advice on how to write characters from the queer community, or just, characters from marginalized communities? Because I feel like you mentioned, a lot of time these characters are reduced to stock characters instead of being in the spotlight. So, as a writer, would you give some advice?
Yes, one thing is write what you feel for the character and then get it assessed by somebody from the community. If
Mm-hmm.
you're writing about a Bengali woman, come
Mm-hmm.
and ask me, and I'll tell you, like, yeah, this does sound like a woman, or this. Um, there was just like, if a man writes a woman's character, it would be better if you show it to a woman and ask her, like, was this okay? You
Yeah.
don't need to listen to 100 people, a few good to give you feelers about.
Mm-hmm.
If you're writing about somebody, you should know somebody
Right.
from the community. See, there is a fine line between imagination
Mm-hmm.
and then um, being offensive.
Mm.
If you were to write about aliens, I'm sure you can't consult an alien, editor to check for sensitivity, but other human communities are not out of reach.
Right.
For years, men have been writing women. This is a very what is it? 18 plus comment I'm going to make.
That's okay.
I watched an 80s film quite
Mm-hmm.
recently, and this girl, a young girl, she wants to appear hot in front of a man, and she says to him at a bar, "Hi, I can deep throat."
Mm.
This was written. A woman will never say that. Like,
Mm.
where is my pleasure in it?
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
I don't understand that. And that is how women's pleasure has been written for so long.
Right.
But there is not even 1% of women's pleasure in women's pleasure
Right.
written by. If they had consulted a few women down the line,
Mm.
they would have written far better female characters.
Mm.
And they
That's
would have not messed with our mentality when we were growing up, listening to that and not knowing that your pleasure, your happiness, your self worth matters.
right. Yeah. Women have to do a lot of unlearning, right? When they are growing up.
I started when I was 30.
Right.
Yeah, a long time.
Yeah, I mean, what you're talking about also reminds me of just the fact that, people think that they need to read through feminist theory because feminist theory talks about women issues, they talk about queer communities issues as well. But I feel like, people just need to be decent. People need to be decent human
Exactly.
beings. I mean, that's the crux of it, right? So, well, we are running out of time, Sheba. So my last question to you is, because you've been able to so passionately write about your thoughts and feelings, what's next? What can we expect next from you?
Uh, I'm I'm in a flux. I feel like writing a few short stories, a few
Okay.
short stories for kids to scare them so badly they don't come out of their house.
Oh,
Yes, I feel
wow.
like that, yeah.
That's new.
Either that, or else I'm also working on a script that's on the back burner now.
Okay.
And yes, and I'm studying. I'm pursuing my master's.
That's
So
brilliant. I feel like, I mean, I don't know how you do it. You're doing so many things at a time, but I'm glad because as your reader and as your editor, in a way, I've been blessed to, know someone like you who is able to translate, so many social and political issues into your stories in such an easy way, in a way that, people are not intimidated when they pick up your book, which is why I would also like to encourage our audience who are watching this to pick up Butterfly in a Bind. It's a beautiful story. I mean, it's fast paced, it's engaging, and it's like, you'll definitely come out thinking about a lot of things. It's very thought provoking, right, Sheba? So yeah, would you like to say something to the audience as the closing note?
if you have questions about Vijaya or Shama or anybody in the book,
Mhm.
please do talk to me. I love discussing your thoughts. Like um, a lot of my author readers have been getting back to me,
Mhm.
and their take on the book has been enlightening for me. Like how it
Mhm.
affected.
Right,
So
definitely. I mean,
please,
review matters. Review definitely matters. Can you tell where they can reach you at? Like maybe your email or something?
my Instagram at Sheba Ghosh. Me
Okay.
and my little.
Okay. And also you can, I mean, if you buy the book from Amazon, you can definitely give a review to Sheba's book on Amazon as well.
Please do.
Definitely. I'll definitely put down a link for the book where you can buy the book in my Instagram and Facebook posts when I post this interview. So thank you once again, Sheba, for joining me and for such an insightful conversation today. And I really hope that you have a good day ahead.
Thank you, Isvi, for being such a nice host, for allowing me to ramble on, and for listening to
Always.
me patiently. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye. Bye.
Bye. See you.